Hi, my name is Brian Abers, and in September of 2021, I tested positive for a banned substance that was subsequently found to be a contaminated supplement. This is my story. So, in September of 2021, I competed at Masters National Track Championships, went through the USADA testing, went through doping control, didn't think a lot about it at all. About 2 to 3 weeks later, I got a call from USADA informing me that I had tested positive with 0.011 micrograms per milliliter of urine of ibutamoren, which is a banned substance, falls under it's a SARM, and it falls under other anabolic agents. At that point, I was a bit shocked, was not expecting that in the slightest. Gave them permission to test my B sample, while for more than anything else, to give myself a little bit of time to figure out just what in the hell just happened. At that point, I called USOPC, the Ombuds office, and asked for some advice because this was something that I was completely unprepared to deal with. At that point, they recommended that I should consult an attorney. And so I found an attorney, consulted them, and started the process of dealing with USADA positive testing. So upon contacting my attorney, I explained my story, I explained the situation. At some point during that process, I got the B sample back, and lo and behold, the B sample showed exactly the same thing that the A sample does. I've never really understood the purpose of a B sample because I'm the one that put my urine into two different bottles. It's the same urine. If it showed up in one, it's going to show up in the other. So that's always been a bit baffling to me, but nonetheless, spoke to my attorney. He recommended that I send in all of my supplements to be tested to see if we can find which one it was and what we're going to do, what the next step was. At that point, I loaded a large box of protein powder and glutamine and creatine and beta-alanine, which is pretty much the stuff that I had been taking on a regular basis for years. And loaded it up, sent it in, paid a retainer fee, and started the process of testing all of the products, thinking that I was in big trouble, really, because I couldn't imagine anything I was taking containing something like ibutamoren. At that point, I was pretty distraught. I was pretty upset. I've always been pretty adamant about anti-doping and a big fan of the whole process. Your perspective changes a little bit when you get that call, however. It is not something you really want to go through. So one of the things with all of this is the process in which I got to this point. And I think that's an important point that we need to cover. But got the results back, and it turns out that it was they had found a contaminated substance in a tub of glutamine that I had. Did not expect that. Glutamine's an amino acid. It's not something that's one of these nefarious, crazy pre-workout, cutting edge sort of things. It's simply a recovery aid that I was taking that supplemented regular glutamine production. At that point, the results were sent to USADA, and this is now probably November at this point. USADA took the same sample, tested it at their lab, confirmed that it was contaminated with this substance, and then a negotiation process between USADA and my attorneys began. So while my attorneys and USADA were chatting back and forth, I was pretty much sitting on the sidelines. The expense of the attorney, while well worth it, is not something that I was readily able to cover. So my involvement with that process was as limited as I could make it, simply because I couldn't afford to, make it any more involved financially. At some point during this process, from being notified to a resolution of that was roughly 6 months. So it's a long process. The ultimate conclusion to this was USADA, prior to going to arbitration, offered me a 12-month suspension to essentially avoid arbitration, presumably. And the simple fact was that I couldn't afford the $15,000 to $18,000 additional to make it through arbitration, to potentially reduce a sentence from 12 months to 6 months, and it just financially wasn't a possibility at that point. So that whole process took, like I said, 6 months. The attorneys are absolutely necessary with this. I have no idea how to negotiate with USADA. That is not something that is anywhere near my wheelhouse, and I think that's an absolute requirement when you are hit with a situation like this, where you don't feel like you did anything wrong, and yet the evidence is clear that there was a substance in your system. Hence, I tested positive. I'm a doper. Whether I intended to or not is immaterial. This stuff was in my system, and that's what I had to deal with.